Why is Joker the most terrifying villain in all of comics? Well, it's because while every other baddie has their own distinct goal or motivation, Joker doesn't want anything. He just wants to make Batman miserable by any means necessary. And what's more frightening than a chaotic neutral being, he made his first appearance back in the Golden Age in Batman issue 1 from April 1940. But it was only a few years later that he became the maniacal, murderous psychopath that we know and love today. Writer Bill Finger and artist Jerry Robinson's run on Detective Comics helped establish this new take on the character, with him even getting his own comic, although that was more lighthearted in tone. However, over time, he gradually got darker and darker, culminating in the late 80s with Alan Moore and Brian Bolland's graphic novel, The Killing Joke. This story firmly established the version of Joker that most people think of when they hear his name. So much so that it's inspired countless copycats and imitators across other media. In fact, despite his age, he's actually one of the most popular villains in the world, ranking higher than Hannibal Lecter and Norman Bates according to a 2019 survey by YouGov. It makes sense why, as deep down, we all have a little bit of chaos inside of us. I mean, just look at how many videos you've watched on this channel. But enough about his popularity. What is it about the Joker that strikes such terror into our hearts? Well, possibly the fact that there are so many unanswered questions surrounding his past. He's one of the few villains that has no confirmed origin story, making him incredibly mysterious. So, what little do we know? Well, for starters, he was born with the name Jack. We don't know his last name because it's never been confirmed, although some sources say Nash, possibly a nod to the famous comedian, actor, and magician Hank, presumably short for John Henry. As a kid, he lived in Gotham, although not much else is known about his early life, except that he grew up poor and had an abusive father. What we do know is that he grew up aspiring to be a stand-up comedian, but he ended up going down a far different path after high school, joining a gang and becoming a common criminal. At some point, he met and married a woman named Harleen Quinzel, who would become the supervillain Harley Quinn. But tragically, she was killed in an altercation gone wrong. Then one fateful night, Jack decided to go out and buy some chemicals to turn his skin white and become a clown. In order to cover up the scars on his face, however, during the process, something went horribly wrong, turning his face green and giving him a white complexion. And so Jack became the Joker. Sounds pretty straightforward, right? Well, hang on, because there are actually two other versions of his origin that have been depicted in comics over the years. In one story, he was born in a circus in 1943 and renamed Joseph Cousteau. Then another story suggests he was born in 1947 under the name Jack Osceola, and this timeline would make the most sense as it lines up with the events of The Killing Joke. Each one of these stories was released under different Elseworlds banners, meaning they all exist in alternate universes. Yet none of them were ever declared canon. Instead, DC Comics have chosen to keep it deliberately vague, and there are a few reasons behind why they've done this. Firstly, DC didn't think anyone would care about the Joker's backstory. Originally, he was meant to be a one-off joke. Get it, bad guy, and that was that. However, over time, fans began to show interest in him, and the company needed to come up with an explanation for who he was, but even then, they didn't think it was important to the character. Writer Paul Dini once said, "I think that if we ever really found out how he became the Joker, part of the mystique would be lost. I think it's better that we don't know." It's like when young kids ask, does Santa Claus really live at the North Pole? As long as you pretend he does, you keep the magic alive. If you ever find out that Santa's just some fat guy named Chris who lives in Phoenix, and he only comes to your house every Christmas because you leave cookies out for him, well, maybe the magic will be lost a little bit. The Joker is a lot more fun if we don't know the complete story. If you try to pin him down and explain him, he slips through your fingers. It gives the character a certain charm, that air of mystery about him. Plus, the lack of a solid answer leaves room for speculation, allowing fans to come up with their own theories. And boy, have they come up with some interesting ones. One of the most popular stems from The Killing Joke, where Joker says he used to work at Ace Chemicals, which could imply that he used to be a scientist there. So some fans have speculated that he was a former employee who experimented on himself. Others believe he was born with the name Jack White, which changed to Joker after his face became discolored. Then there's the theory that he was a former henchman of Batman who was framed for a crime he didn't commit, leading him to seek revenge against his former boss. Alternatively, he might have been a nobody that Batman accidentally pushed over the edge. After all, they are kind of two sides of the same coin, one dark reflection of the other. There's also a version of the character called the Red Hood, who was originally Jason Todd, the second Robin, but he too has a mysterious past before becoming the Boy Wonder. It's heavily implied that he was adopted by Bruce Wayne after his birth mother, presumably a criminal, abandoned him. But who exactly was she and what was his father's name? Well, again, it's left deliberately vague, although some sources list his birth name as Jason Peter. There are also some intriguing connections between the two characters. For example, both of their fathers were killed when they were young, but aside from that, there are no concrete links between the two. Despite this, some fans have theorized that Red Hood is actually Joker's son, and here's why. Back in Detective Comics number 861, Harleen Quinzel mentions that she used to visit Jack at Arkham Asylum and that he was the only man she ever loved. But he wasn't her husband. Technically, since Joker is the only man she ever loved, this could imply that he was the only man she ever slept with. And if Jack was already at Arkham when she visited him, then it stands to reason that their child would have been conceived before she became Harley Quinn. Plus, Red Hood and Joker share some striking similarities. They're both violent, impulsive, and have a warped sense of humor. Not to mention Red Hood once took on a whole gang of clowns single-handedly. Could it really be possible that Joker's bloodline is running through Gotham's underworld? Well, there are some other intriguing theories worth mentioning. A few years ago, writer James Tynion IV proposed that the Joker could actually be the spirit of vengeance inhabiting the body of Jack O'Sello. This is similar to the way that Bruce Wayne is the host of Batman, and if you think about it, it does make some sense. Both Bruce and Jack are alter egos with a tragic backstory, and they're both intrinsically linked to Gotham itself. Then again, the Joker could simply be human, just a deeply disturbed individual who was driven insane by tragedy. There's even a theory that he's mentally projecting alternate personalities depending on who he's talking to. But whichever one is true, if any, proves that he's still one of the most frightening villains in comics. His sheer unpredictability and nihilistic worldview makes him impossible to reason with. And on top of that, he's somehow always one step ahead of the authorities, always managing to evade capture. So what do you think? Does the Joker need an origin story, or should DC continue to keep it a secret? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, make sure you hit that like button. Until next time, thank you so much for watching.